Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Susan Smith. You're in my studio, Stitched by Susan. Today we're working on something a bit unusual. I'm doing some applique at the Longarm, and just a little disclaimer, some of this is techniques that I've not done before, but it's a quilt I've got to do this week, and I thought, I'll go live. I don't mind. I'll show you my process. We'll kind of chat through it. Maybe some of you have done some of these things before. Perhaps you'll get to see me stumbling over it, and perhaps it'll turn out wonderful and all will go well. But either way, we'll have a good time quilting together. So it's a great day for having a project of your own on the go if you're, not watching from work. If you're at home and in your crafty room or, baking sourdough bread or whatever. Because we've got a nice little cue of music going on because there will be periods of time when I'm just thinking and working, and I'll let you see what I'm doing, but I won't necessarily talk you through it because I'm not going to be teaching today. I don't really know what I'm doing either. So the quilt in progress is a wonderful, it's a wall hanging. It's round. It has applique bumblebees on it. And there is definitely a story behind it, which I'll tell as we get into it today. Do we want to greet just a couple folks, Dave? Or just dive into the process?
We can dive in. We're good.
Okay. I've got my backing set up and ready. Let me get a sip of coffee. Just one. That will keep me going for a while. I've got my backing ready, and initially I was going to have this all preloaded, and then Dave said to me, Mr. Producer, you haven't done a loading in a while, so maybe let's do it today. So I will, because there are a couple things I did slightly unusually today. One of them is my wall hanging, I cut out of a width of fabric, but it's a circle and I made it just fit. So it's about 40 or 41 inches in diameter, therefore almost filling up a width of fabric. So when I went to cut my backing, I could make it long enough this way, but it wasn't much wider in the other direction. So what I did is sewed leaders onto the selvage sides. I just took 2 long strips of fabric. I've just got it basted on. I didn't even press it. I just need that little bit of excess room. I'll be doing some ruler work, so I put a few inches on there. So help me remember, you guys, to put my wall hanging on sideways because this is a bit directional. Fun backing, has lots of musical instruments on it, which is cool. I'll tell you the story of the quilt and who it's for as we go along, so this kind of matters in that way. So again, being directional, my rule of thumb is I put top to the left, both on backing and topping on top whenever I can, so that I know that. I don't have to stop and think, did I point right? Did I point left? I always point left. So I'm going to have the top end of this backing going left, and therefore I'll put my bees facing going left too. So this is my usual system. I've showed this in lots and lots of live and unscripted episodes using red snappers, which I've got in my hand. There's a tiny rod inserted into the hem of my leader, which this will snap over. And I've got a selvage edge. You don't have to have a selvage, but you do need a straight edge for this first side. And I have selvage, so I know it's straight. And I just walk along and snap that on. Boy, it is warm in here. Whew. Pardon me if I look a little red in the face. I feel a little flushed. And it is Casual Friday in the studio, by the way. You can see I'm schlepping around in my sweatshirt. People have that, right? Casual Fridays? Yeah, that's us. So just snapping this whole front edge on. And equally, you could do that with pins. But attaching it to that front edge first allows me to then toss the remainder of my backing over my far rail, adjust it so that it's nice and straight. It's not veering to the left or right. Get it nice and straight. And then I'll be able to just roll it on. So I have not centered on my long arm. I've not had to find the center of my backing or the center of my top. This is such a quick way to load. And it doesn't matter whether you use snappers or pins or magnets or whatever to affix it. But just the idea of having a straight edge, lining everything up straight, and then rolling it on works like a charm. So let me undo my clamps at the sides and we'll roll this on. And I'm watching my further leader just to see when I'm approaching with my backing, I'm approaching the edge of it, and then I'll walk around and attach my other grips, whatever they may be. In my case, they're red snappers. In your case, they might be something else. And I keep a magnet. I'm not sure which camera's on. I keep a long magnetic bar on this side as my kind of holder pin almost, so that my quilt doesn't slip off. So I just leave that on this side of the long arm so it's handy every time I'm loading. And again, I've showed this loading process sometimes in more detail on other live and unscripted episodes. Feel free to refer back to those. I've gone over it lots and lots of times. And I should mention here, in case there are new folks on this morning, what is live and unscripted? Well, it's me working in my studio in real time without any edits. So we will not change this as we go. We'll not edit stuff out. However, those of you who have watched before probably saw that I just made an oops. So, Dave, do we maybe want to turn? Can I move Stella and we'll put the other camera on? I'll let you guys learn from my oops. I did it because I'm busy talking. I know better. But you might as well see it and benefit from it. Yes, but you're going to the little roaming camera. And I'll show you what I did. That does not show it well. No, let's use the other one because that one's positioned. Sorry, you guys. We're fiddling around here. I'm going to try and show you what I did. Essentially, what's happened is I have a leveler bar that my quilt has got to go under. And I didn't wrap my leader first, and so it's now floating on top of that leveler bar, and that absolutely won't work. So all that means is we get to back up a little bit and do some of that process again. So we'll get our front loosened up. We'll take our back edge off, and I'll show you how I should have prepped that and how I usually do. And because it's all too easy to forget, my usual rule of thumb is that I prep this. When I unload one quilt, I wrap it round for the next one. So I'm just taking my leader, going under said leveler bar, which, by the way, you're going to get to see a little later on. I've got something else I want to show you on there, and over the top. And I learned this method kind of by trial and error. I used to run a Gamble machine, which didn't have the leveler bar, so this was a bit of a change for me, but I wanted to be able to use my system, as I've showed you, of just loading the front edge and rolling on the back edge. And so I learned that if I flip that leader over before I attach my quilt backing, then it comes into position correctly. Let's try this again. So once more, we're rolling it until the end of it is nearing the end of my leader. Walking around to the back. Yeah, now it's right. If I had been paying attention and not talking, I would have seen it immediately, but that's how it goes sometimes. Okay, let's try this again. Now we've got it. Perfect. Now we're in business. Okay. Now, one more thing that I wanted to show you. I've decided that for the sake of some fun definition and puff in my quilt, I want to do 2 layers of batting. And I'm going to keep it fairly simple and do 2 layers of Winline, 80-20, 80% cotton, 20% poly. So I've got this piece here that was left over from beside another quilt, right? And it's wide enough, but not quite long enough to fold in half and have 2 layers. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to splice the bottom layer of this without sewing it, right? You absolutely could take these edges to your sewing machine or to a fusible something, but I'm going to show you a faster way. Here's how I do it. Dave, would you see if you can find my scissors? Where did I set them down? I had them this morning, maybe on the ironing board. Let's get this one, which is going to be our top edge. Thank you. Laying on first. Then I'm going to overlap my new piece. And I should insert here, because I bet some of you are going to ask, isn't there a right side up and doesn't it matter? And how can you tell? My personal opinion is with the 80-20, I've done it both ways and not found any appreciable difference. So I'm frankly not going to worry about it. So I am overlapping my two battings by a solid 2 inches, I would say. Let me get this one centered a little better. In the middle of my quilt. And it's just sticking because it's, adhering a little bit. Now I'm going to go cut it, and I'm going to cut it in a scallop edge. And it doesn't really matter how wide or even the scallops are. The point is I don't want a straight edge. I don't want two blunt edges meeting because I feel like that creates a line which can show up in the life of the quilt. So I love to do this with a scalloped cut. So because they overlap 2 inches, I'm going up and down about, an 1.5 inches with my scallops. And I'm trying not to shift too much the batting behind me where my hand is lifting it a little, and you'll see why in a second. And I have done this in other episodes, by the way. I think I have a full-fledged episode that's just about this splicing idea, if you want to go and see it in more detail. So now that I've tried not to shift it, I'm going to pull out my excess bits. And what happens is, because I cut them both together, they fit perfectly together. What's key here, I'm a little close to my bottom edge, because what is key is that I don't allow them to pull apart at all. So I'm actually pushing my batting up against. I don't really want it to overlap, but I want it to be snugly against. I don't want there to be any shortage there. So I'm really pushing that up. Get rid of the little bits. We'll just fling them to the side. And then I'm going to very carefully, without shifting this, lift up the tail of my batting. And remember, I've already decided it doesn't matter to me which right side or wrong side. So I'm just going to flip it up in half and over the top. And now that will kind of hold everything in place for me. And now I have 2 layers of batting. And I don't stitch that. There are times and occasions where I think it needs more security, but generally speaking, as long as I'm going to do close enough quilting that it's going to really anchor that all in place, it's not moving. And I'm custom quilting these bees, so there's going to be plenty of quilting that's going to hold that in place. As long as I've got it well pushed together at that splice, all is going to be well. Let's get the quilt. I have to walk out of camera for a minute. And I am remembering the upside. But I will hold this up a little bit for you. It's a bit odd looking at the moment, and I'll explain to you why. Here's my bumblebee quilt. Gosh, that is bold on camera. It's a little more subtle in real life. Well, I don't know if that's better, Dave. What you're seeing is the shiny sort of lame wings with lovely blue markings on them. And what I'm going to do is get a picture of the pattern to hold up for you and chat a little bit about why I'm doing the quilt this way, why I'm even appliquing it at the long arm. Hang on a sec. Let me find my picture. So you can kind of envision the whole thing. So there is a picture of part of it in the thumbnail of this episode. And also I've linked to the pattern in the description. And so you can always go and look at that as well. Okay, big camera. Here we go. So here is the Quilting Bee. So you can kind of see where we're going. On this one, her honeycomb shapes don't contrast very much, so it's hard to tell even what's background and what's honeycombs, but you can kind of see them there. Here's the thing about it. Let's put our close-up camera on for just a jiffy, Dave. Well, there's more than one thing about it, but here's the big thing that I discovered as I got going. All these little legs have a tremendous amount of tiny detail. Now, if I had been thinking more quickly on the fly, I would have taken this leg and maybe put this joint in it and then done smooth edges here. But I cut them out exactly as she said. For all these bees who each have 6 legs and there's 7 bees, it took me about 3 hours. Let's have a face on camera again. It took me a pretty solid 3 hours just to cut out the bee parts. Those legs were nuts. And then, of course, the next step in the pattern is to applique them. Now, machine applique is what she recommends, but still, to machine go around all those little curves, I just thought, oh my word, I'll be here for 49 years. And then the wings are another step. All the blue markings on them is the kind of detail in the wings. So The pattern suggests that you take this to your sewing machine and you do a silver thread zigzag over all those lines. Again, we have 14 wings with a lot of lines each. And then you load it up and quilt it and quilt over some of them to create some puff, some depth, some detail in those wings. So I had friends over for a sew day and I said, you guys, it's unrealistic to think that I'm going to put another 10 hours into appliquing and quilting this little quilt. I'm apt to not get it done. So let's think of an easier way so that I actually get it done, right? That's my goal. So that's when we started talking about what if I just go ahead and fuse all these things onto the quilt? And what if I do all the applique of the bees and all the silver detail stitching of the wings at the long arm? And in some ways I like that better because I think having more of the details in the wings with the quilted loft is going to be pretty. In the original pattern, she kind of just edge stitched them and did one accent through the middle. And that I didn't feel like was enough. So some of this, I just don't know how it's going to really look until afterwards. But it seems to my mind like it will work okay. So I'm going to try it. So we have 2 layers of batting. We have the bees facing that way. We have the background facing that way. So we're golden. There is a queen bee in the middle, and she's a little bit different. She just has different antenna is all that's different about her. So I've got her facing upwards that way. And I don't have my quilt quite oriented right. So let's turn it just a little. Is that about right? Still not quite enough. That's better. That's about the same. That's about straight up. That's pretty good. Okay. So a couple more things about the construction. All the hexes I did affix very lightly, just with a little bit of diluted Elmer's glue to put them in place, and I machine appliqued them down. I certainly could have done something fusible on the back of them. That's what the pattern suggested. That's a lot of fusible to quilt through, and I don't love, love, love quilting through it. And I knew the bee was going to have fusible, so then you start getting double layers, right? So I opted to just get them in place with glue and stitch them down. So that's what I did with the hexes. And then the bees all do have a medium to lightweight fusible web on the back of them. And the wings have a very lightweight fusible web on the back of them. And they're just a shiny kind of lame type fabric. I couldn't even tell you what exactly. I got it on the cheap at Walmart. So we are going to start by basting the edge of the quilt. And I think because it is round and because it has a bit of unevenness, you know, because of stitching all those hexes down, I'm going to go ahead and drop in some pins so that I'm sure it's not going to shift out of where I want it to be, right, as I'm basting. I don't want any ugly surprises, and it doesn't really matter at all which way the pins go. I'll probably take them out as I'm basting. I just want to get it held in place here and there so that it doesn't drastically shift. And I'm kind of watching what's hanging in front of me. It is floating, right? The batting and the quilt are just hanging down in front of me. And I'm double checking that my fold of batting goes far enough, and it does. So we're good that way. Before I start basting, I think this is probably a good time to show you the leveler bar that I talk about so often and that you ask about so often. And I have one other little tool installed for today that I think you might be interested in as well. And we can show them both with a particular camera view. So let me get rid of my pins for a second. Whoops, dropped one on the floor. Can't ignore that. Pardon me while I fetch it. Okay, so if we want to look with the other camera for a sec, yep, there we are. Okay, this is my leveler bar right here. So this square bar goes all the way across my frame from one side to the other, and you can just about see it here on resting on my quilt, or more accurately, my quilt is being fed under the bottom of it. Leveler bar or dead bar, it's called both names. But it does keep your quilting surface level. It never changes, no matter how chubby the quilt, this end, no matter how chubby of a quilt finished that you're taking up on this roller, this leveler bar still feeds your quilting surface at exactly the same level. Now, what you guys are always asking to see is my tape measure that's on here. This is called the Longarm's tape measure. There's a link in my tools in the description. You can find it lots of places. It's like a dressmaker's tape, kind of plasticky, but long. And it does have a 0 marking in the middle, and then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., extending out from that. But as I showed you with my loading, I don't actually pay any attention to centering my project on the quilting frame. I just clap it on there. But I use the numbers to take note of when I have a square quilt, where's the left side of it and where's the right side of my quilt, and maybe where's the center line, and I can keep aligning things as I go. So that's kind of how I use that tape, and it is just stuck on with like 3M brand office type double-sided tape. And I just started in the middle with little sections of tape, stuck them on and stuck the tape on till I got to the edge and trimmed it off. And that's been on there for several years in many, many quilts, and it does not shift at all. The other tool I wanted to show you is right here. This is so cool. There is a lady named Heather. She is a hobbyist quilter like I am, but she saw a need for tools for quilters, and she has developed a business 3D printing these tools. And this particular one is a ruler holder. As you see, it's red because it's kind of designed for a Bernina. So the little latch bit, you saw me unhook it, I can hook it back up. It literally rests securely on the frame of my Bernina Longarm, and it's slotted for rulers. What you can't see as well is that Heather, being a quilter, this is what I love about people who use the tools, making the tools, designing them. She has thought through the bottom of these grooves is round. So if I put a round ruler in like this one, it will not roll away when my thing is sitting level, right? It does not roll because it's literally sitting in a concave place. So it works for both square and round rulers. So how I use it then is instead of having to have a cart next to me when I'm working on custom quilting with a bunch of my tools, my rulers that I'm using can just slot in there. And then I have this secondary little one, which was harder to get in and out, but is here. And it's simply a cup. Could be your marking pens, could be your seam ripper, could be your whatever. But again, saving you from having to have another receptacle for your tools. I used to, when I did custom quilts, I actually had a little cart on wheels that I would put all my current stuff for this quilt on and just roll it back and forth along the long arm with me. Let's go back to the big page, front camera. So Heather has been, I'll give you that, Purple Hobbies. The link is in the description. Mr. Producer will find it too. But note, in the description, this is in there, so you might want to have a look at that. Heather has graciously offered 15% off to any of you who want to purchase any of her products. And this is just two. She has tons of little time-saving, efficient gadgets, lots of them. So 15% off, just use SBS 15 for Stitched by Susan 15. Dave's giving you the website link. Use that coupon code, and that link is always good. It's linked to this episode, and it always works. Okay, let's get on to basting. I do have my ruler plate already attached because I know I'm going to do ruler work, and probably for today's purposes, I'll leave it on. There's no reason I cannot leave it on. It does not, you can. It just shortens my throat space because it keeps me from moving as far forward in my frame. That's the only reason I typically will take it off. I'll try and do all the ruler work and then take it off and go back to the free motion. But today I'm apt to be going back and forth and back. So we'll probably just leave it on. So we're going to put a basting stitch on and start basting this edge. Now, I know that it's going to get a binding put on it. So I can approach this basting one of two ways. I can wing it, and it doesn't really matter if it has an even curve as long as I stay within, the 1/4 inch seam allowance, or I can fish out a ruler. I choose to wing it because it's hard to set a ruler on top of pins. They wobble terribly. So as long as it works reasonably well, I'm just going to wing it. Right? It does not have to be pretty. It does not have to be a smooth curve. It's just got to catch the fabric and stay within the seam allowance line. And I'm using my fingernail sometimes to pull it under the needle a bit faster. Almost all of this is on the bias because it's a curved edge. And so I don't want it to push out in front of my hopper foot. I want it to keep up. So when I need to, I'm just tugging a little bit with my fingernail. You can also grasp the edge and pull it. Whatever works. Push it under with the finger. Look at that lovely round stitching. But again, it doesn't matter, so don't worry about it. And yes, I do stitch over my pins frequently. I'm doing it very slowly. I've never broken a pin in all these years and all these quilts. This one I'm going to move simply because the head of it is so close I'm apt to hit it. I'll come back and gather up the pins afterwards. Again, I could have thought of that and arranged my pin differently, but I didn't. So this basting, I mean, I baste like this for every quilt I do, even the straight ones and square ones. I always baste before I start quilting. It holds everything in place, but it is absolutely critical on a round quilt like this one. It would get so wonky and so misshapen if you started quilting and it started pulling in areas. Yeah, it would get so wonky. You must baste. That is your foundational shape establisher. All right, we'll grab all those pins. And the next step is really to decide what we're going to start with. And there are a few choices. Let's think this through a little bit. We can have our front on camera, and I'm going to grab my coffee. Oh, maybe that's not right, Dave. I'm sorry about that. We should have the wide angle view so people can see what I'm looking at and thinking about. There we go. As I look at this and I think, what do I want to quilt first? Do I want to put silver thread on and quilt those wings because there's one every so often? Do I want to get the bees in place? Do I want to start with the hexies? I don't think any of those are wrong, and here's kind of why. When I'm starting a custom quilting project like this, one of my goals is to not start on one side and work toward the other because it's apt to push the quilt out of shape, especially when I've got 2 layers of batting. There's quite a lot of room for shiftage in there. So I like to divide and conquer. So whatever I do, I'm going to do something and then something else and like sort of divide it up and split it up and get areas that are evenly spaced, secured, and then start doing the detail in between. So for example, I would not start with this hexie and quilt all the details in that hexie. And then this one and do all the details in that one. I would, if I was going to do with the hexies first, I would outline them first, and I would probably do the middle one first, and then start to work around. Because once that middle one is in place, right, less room for shiftage. You're dividing, you're conquering. But equally, I could do the applique on the bees, and it will essentially serve the same purpose. I'll applique this bee, and then I'll applique this bee, and now this area is quite secure. I could even do it on the wings. So let's see, what are we going to start with? I have gold thread loaded, so I think we'll start with the hexies. I am going to outline the bees, I think, in black. There is gold on them, but only because most of them is in black, and I think gold thread on the black legs would look distracting, where I think black thread on the body will not be as distracting. So that's my choice. One more sip of coffee. Okay, we've got gold thread loaded. We've got a ruler plate on. We'll grab the ruler and let's take a minute, yes, for questions. Good plan, Mr. Producer, sir. He's done this a time or 10 before. Bobbing with Brittany. Ugh, I always do that. I remind myself, wrap the burrito from Adam, so fun. Yes, Brittany and I have done it enough times too that, like I said, my typical habit now is when I'm unloading one quilt, I wrap that leader preparatory for the next one, and then I don't have to remember it at the beginning, right? It's done. April, is your Bernina on a pro frame? And if it is, how did you make the bars magnetic? April, great question. Let me just take 1 second to introduce my machine because I haven't done that. I'm driving a Bernina Q24. The 24 simply means it's 24 inches from front to back. All the Bernina long arms are identical except for size. So you'll just see that number notation for size. What else? Her name is Stella, because you'll hear me talking about Stella often. Now you asked, is it a pro frame? Yes, it is. So the pro frame is the square portions, like the where I had the leveler bar that I showed the tape measure on. That's the part that's aluminum. But in all cases, pro frame and studio frame alike, the rails, the actual rollers, are magnetic. They're metal. I mean, aluminum is a metal too, but they're a magnetic metal. And so my magnetic bars cling to that steel. They're not aluminum. Does that answer the question? And I'm glad you asked it because I will put my magnetic bars on the front rail yet too before I start quilting. Debbie, what kind of material are the wings made from? They're just an inexpensive lame, like quite see-through, Debbie. They look fairly white on this, and I'm hoping that when I get them quilted and when I wash out that washable stabilizer, that they'll look a little more translucent. This is what she recommended in the pattern, and it's just a see-through. It's a much finer weave than a tooling, but a bit like that. And it's just a bit sparkly, and mine has a bit of silver sparkles in it. That's what they are. Corey, I have a question about magnets. Are there different strengths? I bought some similar to yours and they don't hold my top, wool batting, and minky backing. I've never had magnetic bars fall off, Corey. So perhaps they do come in more strengths than one. I don't know that for sure. I just grabbed them at my hardware store and they're just standard as far as I know. Now, wool batting and minky backing is asking quite a bit. Are you putting them on a roller where the backing is wrapped around so there's multiple layers of the minky? Because that is a point to note, even with cotton fabrics. I use my front roller, my belly bar that's right in front of me. I don't actually roll anything onto that. Just my layers just go over it. So I've got backing, batting, top, but no more. There's never additional layers. And I've never had a magnetic bar fall off. So that's my thoughts on that. Debbie, what plans do you have for this round quilt? Will it be a wall hanging or a table topper? It is going to be a wall hanging, Debbie. And there's a suggestion actually in the pattern for a brand of hoop. I don't know if it's a full hoop or a half hoop that helps to hang a round one flat. But I actually do have a round one of my own that I made years ago that I put a sleeve on just, maybe 4 inches down from the top, and it actually hangs quite nicely on the wall. So wall hanging is where we're going. Nita, would starting in the middle and working from the center out work? It probably would, Nita, but if I was going to do that, I would put basting lines like every 6 inches down my whole quilt before I started. My personal experience is that when I roll a quilt, and this one's not that big, it won't get that many rolls, but even when it's like stretched over the belly bar, you get a certain amount of, it's tiny, but a certain amount of stretch in that quilt top. And so when I go, if I baste it all the way down and then I back up, it feels like there's excess in those top layers. And again, that is accentuated with the thickness of a double batting. So I personally prefer to just baste if I need to, but only do the areas that I'm working on and only do as far as my front belly bar. That's my personal preference. Debbie, I wonder if the holders hooked to the Bernina studio frame, they would be very useful to me. I'll have to try that out. I should carry some with me to a quilt show. Ours is coming up in a few weeks in Spokane, and see, because I can't remember off the top of my head what the ends of a studio frame look like. But if not, reach out to Heather at Purple Hobbies because I bet you she'll think of a solution for you. I'm telling you, she has dozens and dozens. Actually, I have another one here. Let me show you guys this. This is my, setting my coffee down here. This is my pin holder. And it's magnetic in the bottom and it collapses for carrying. Now I have tall pins in it, so I can't actually put the lid on, but you can to carry it. And then it just opens up like a tall cup, and that's what I keep my pins in. And it's quite fun that they're red to match the Bernina colors. More questions? Oh yes. David, hello from Medical Lake. I'm late. Can you tell me about your gold thread? I love it. Absolutely. This thread I'll be using throughout the quilt, and it is by Isacord. That's kind of my current favorite brand. It's a 40 weight. It's 100% polyester. And if you go to their website and look for it, get asked this quite a bit, is it the same as the embroidery thread? Yes, it is. So Isacord developed their thread for embroidery in commercial uses like apron logos and caps and things like that. But so it is glossy like embroidery thread is and like polyester thread tends to be. The qualities that make it great for embroidery, strong, able to withstand high-speed stitching, make it perfect for long arming too. So my color is 0721 and it is 40 weight, 100% polyester thread by Isacord. It seemed to be the color that would go pretty nicely with all of the golds and caramels that are in this quilt. Diana, I'm sorry I missed the very beginning. Can you tell me when you would use double batting? Sure. It's strictly personal preference, I think, Diana. What it does, the reason why I like it sometimes is that it provides fluff and your quilting really pops. Reasons why I wouldn't include it is because it also makes your quilt twice as heavy, or at least the batting of it twice as heavy. So if it's a couch use quilt, you might not love that. And sometimes I don't love it for a wall hanging because if it's puffy, it might not hang as flat. But I have some tricks in my mind about not basting, but what's the word I want to say? You know, moistening and stretching this one, blocking, about blocking this one that I think will help it to lay flat. So my reason for using it is to get that extra loft and puff to really show off the quilting. Oftentimes when I do double batting, I'll do two different types. Like I'll do a more flat one on the back as a kind of base. So it could be 80-20. It could be, if you have warm and natural, all cotton, and then do something really lofty on top. Could be wool, could be polyester. But as it happens, I don't have any wool on hand right now. So I decided to just do 2 layers of the 80-20. That's what I've got here right now. So that's what I'm doing. One more. We Quilt Studio, did you use Heat and Bond Light on the bees? You ask a hard thing because I used all of it. I actually had to splice some of the last wings, and I don't have the package anymore, but it had a 2 in it. I think it was Heat and Bond 2, and it came in like 8.5 by 11 sheets is how it came to me, in multiple sheets in an envelope, and I used that for the bees and the wings. And it's a wash away stabilizer because I don't want the whole thing to be stiff and crunchy, right? Lots of places have several layers of it. So, okay, I'm going to do one more thing before I start stitching. I should have done this in my prep. So usually before I come live on a Friday morning like this, I oil my machine, I clean the lint out, etc. But this week I was working on a batik quilt and I did not put a fresh needle in, and I'm going to take the time to do that now. Batik is notorious for dulling needles, so it's a great time to put in a fresh needle. I'm dealing with some challenges here, right? Multiple layers, fusible on the back of some of the fabrics and things like that. So let's just take a second and put in a fresh needle. My personal favorite that I use for kind of all purpose is, hang on a second here, I need to get a new package out. It's a top stitch needle. And so I'm just going to grab a fresh one here, grab my screwdriver. There we go. I love a top stitch needle. Another quilter introduced me to these, and the feature that she likes about them is they have an extra long scarf. That's the area where the eye is, and so the eye is actually a bit longer. And when I've had problems with thread breakings, like with quilts that have all kinds of different fabrics in it, this has been my solution. And because it worked so well for that, I kind of just use it for everything now. So I'm using a 90-14 for size, which is fairly average, probably smaller than some long armors use, but it works well for me. So I've got a 90-14 top stitch needle chrome by Schmetz. And I buy these in the case. I don't change my needle with every single quilt, especially if it's a small quilt. But if I hear it tapping at all, or I'm having any issues at all with skip stitches, then straight to needle change. That's the first and least expensive thing to do. I'm struggling with my threader. Bernina feature, by the way, that we all love, because we can use regular sewing machine needles and they have a flat back and they go in only one way. That means we get to have a needle threader. And I keep, well, I have a couple options, but I keep this is a little Bernina bobbin case. Do you see this little guy? I keep this handy next to my machine for my sharps. A little pill bottle, a little anything that's robust plastic will work for that. Okay, we're in business. Let us start. Again, I'm just thinking this through because I'm thinking, how many times do I want to stop and break thread, right? So I'm looking at this little golden area. You can kind of see that between these hexes and between these wings. And I'm thinking I could anchor this hexie, do my little fill, do my anchor there, right? And do that kind of area. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you changed cameras. There we go. This little golden area here. So, you know, I could just do the line and just do the line, but I already know I'm going to do a kind of bubbly fill. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that fill, although I will not outline the wing because I'm going to do that in the silver when I applique it on later. So now I'm just going to work for a little bit. I value your opinions, especially if some of you have done this type of thing before. If you have some thoughts or ideas about the bees when I get to appliquing those, I'd love to hear them before I start stitching them. So I've got my ruler here, my ruler plate is on, my base underneath, and my ruler foot, which has this deep profile. So that's the prep I've done to do this. And I am stitching 10 stitches per inch on BSR 2 for those of you that have a Bernina. That just means when I stop moving, my machine stops stitching, but otherwise I have a stitch regulator on. I'm just going to cut those little tails. It's not going to look like it has very good definition until I start stitching around the wings, but that's okay. We know that will come. We're quilters. We can capture a vision, can't we? All I'm keeping in mind is that I want to end up at this top edge so that I can then take my ruler and zip across here. So now you know what I'm doing for background fill between all the hexies. Basically, we're just going to start doing those. Now we've got the middle kind of anchored. We're just going to start doing those in all the different areas that I can reach within my throat space. And I'm going to take a second and put my magnets on my floating top. And I do feel that they're not gripping quite as hard because I've got double layers of batting, but I don't think there's any danger of them falling off and whacking my toe. They're still fairly secure. I like winging it when I'm doing bubbles. I don't have a fixed plan. I do not try and get them all the same size. I do multiple sizes, sometimes multiple layers in a bubble, sometimes a little hook in a bubble. Those are kind of my favorites. Now I'm going to go kind of as far as I can with this anchoring of the ruler work. I'll get a few more bubbles and the side of the next hexie. You can see that there. And then fill all that in with bubbles. Again, you know, anchoring as many different areas as I can before I start going back and putting in the heavy detail that would start pulling it together. There we go. Now that's all held in place. We'll go back and quickly fill in those details. And I absolutely could leave this till later. That's strictly a matter of personal choice. And as I keep working on the quilt, at some point I may decide, oh, those bubbles are pulling things up too tight. I should get some of the details in the hexies beforehand. I may decide that. We'll see how it goes. I just make those decisions on the fly, quite frankly. I'm going to turn my stitch length up to 12. When I do the smaller circles, I feel like they're getting a bit straight-sided, a bit octagonal looking. So the answer to that is a smaller stitch. And probably what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to stop right now, and I'm going to put it on manual mode. I'm going to slow it down a fair bit. So manual mode just means I'm telling my machine now how many stitches per inch, and when I push start, the needle is going to start going at that pace without any stitch regulator on, and I get rounder bubbles that way. So I've set my machine right now for 600. I'm just going to give that a whirl and see how it feels. If it feels like there's a stiff wind at my back, I will slow it down a little. No, it does not feel like that. I need a little faster. I can tell you already. So now we're at 700. Oops. I'm trying to move a little slider delicately. Okay, here we go. If you've never tried stitching in manual mode, when you're doing something round like this, it is so much smoother. So much smoother. And I think it's just because the stitch regulator is always compensating, right? The motor is always speeding up, slowing down. And so if you put this manual mode in, it seems to just run like butter. So this is my preference for sure for making bubbles. And notice that not all my bubbles are round. And notice that I don't really care. I've chosen a thread which pretty much matches, and it will all become scrumptious texture when all is said and done. And I'm not going to worry if they get covered up at the edge by binding. That's okay. I just don't want to fall short and have an empty space at the edge. That would look much worse. And that was a very oval one. The fabric that I used for my background is actually an ombre. So both the outside, the selvage edges of the quilt are much deeper gold, or of the fabric. And so you're starting to see that here. Where I first began quilting was a lighter gold, and we're getting into some deeper golds here and there. So I just chose my thread that I thought worked well with both. It's kind of middle of the road. A bit lighter than the darkest bits, a bit darker than the lightest bits. As you can see, bubbles take a little while. But it's gonna look yummy. There we are. Let's pan over that a little bit, and you can see those yummy bubbles. You can see how dark the gold is here. And it's significantly paler here. I'm not exactly sure how these colors are translating for you on camera. For me, it looks very orange on the screen that I'm looking at, oranger than it does in real life, but whatever, you're getting a feel for it. So let's go over and do this same thing on the other side of the hexes, and then we'll maybe, I don't know if we'll fill hexes or if we'll change threads and start appliquing the bees. That might be what we do next. So yeah, this is a great time. If one of you has done this before, this kind of fine stuff, it is still raw edge. It's affixed with fusible web, but it is still all raw edges, like the bee and wing portions. The hexes are not. Whoops, I want to take that off manual. So if you have any suggestions for, stitch 2 threads inside it, or stitch a full 1/8 of an inch inside it, or anything like that, I'm open to suggestions from others who have experience doing this. And frankly, I'd like to hear what you think of my solution, which is to not try and go down around all those intricate little bitty corners at my sewing machine. Oh my goodness, I just can't even imagine. I'm trying to get my machine at 750. There we go. We're just going to work our way into that top edge where we want to do ruler work again. I've kind of mapped it out in my head before I start, so I know where I'm going. Whoops. Lost my train of thought there. So back to stitch regulation here. I have the camera affixed to my left handlebar for you guys. If I did not have that at my Bernina, I can swing the handlebar, so I would flip that out of the way when I was doing ruler work, or at least lift it a couple inches. It does make it easier to have more space for your arm, but that's just the way it is. We'll just stay unregulated because we're simply going to work across this little corner here. It is very nice to be able to just flip back and forth between regulated and not regulated. It's very, very easy to do. So I do it often. But now we'll go into manual. While I do this, because it's fairly mindless, if some of you are just tuning in, let me give you a quick update. First off, this show is called Live and Unscripted. It is, as far as I know, quilting's first reality show because it is streamed in absolutely real time. So we do not edit out any portion of the show. If things go wrong, you get to see it happen in real time. You get to see the quilting happen in real time, etc. So, quilting's first reality show. Often these episodes will be me working on a client quilt. And so frequently you get to see the whole process from beginning to end. Today I'm working on a quilt for my sister-in-law, and I'll come back to that story a little bit more in a few moments, but I'll stay on track here. And it is a wall hanging, and it's got these wonderful applique bees. There is incredible detail in the wings and the legs of the bees, so I made the decision to do the applique at my long arm on the raw edge, rather than doing all the applique by machine first before I brought it to my long arm. So that's what I'm doing today, and this is kind of a new process for me. I've not done much of this before, certainly not to this level, and so I welcome your comments and thoughts on that. Few stats. The pattern is by Joanne Hoffman. I have put a link in the description of the show for the pattern in case you would like to make a bee quilt of your own. Be aware that the legs have a lot of detail, just saying. I spent a good long Netflix evening cutting them out. So the pattern is linked there, and I'm using a Bernina Q24 to do my stitching. Her name is Stella. And I've got my ruler foot on, which is this foot that has a kind of tall profile, so that I can safely use a ruler against it. The ruler bumps up next to it. And I'm using a ruler by Jamie Wallen of Quilter's Apothecary. That's the straight ruler that I've been using. Link to that also in the description, and a coupon code for a discount if you love that ruler. And what else? I'm using Isocord 100% poly thread in a gold color that's kind of like several areas in the quilt. Right now I'm in the palest gold area. This background fabric is actually an ombre, and so there are pale gold areas like this one, and it shades into darker areas elsewhere. But I'm going to use the same color thread throughout this background regardless. I'm currently stitching in manual mode, which means I've got my machine set at a stitches per inch rate. I chose 750. And as you can see, the needle is going at exactly the same rate all the time. That's called manual mode. And the next thing I do will be switch it into regulated mode, and you'll get to see that too. All right, time for a sip of coffee and deciding what to do next. Let me mention here too, we've talked about what is live and unscripted. Let's have our big view camera, Dave, if we can. We talked about what live and unscripted is, but also YouTube, being what it is always free for you. The only thing you have to pay is watching ads that YouTube puts in the shows. But if you do want to support the show, we're always so appreciative. Your contributions over the years have totally funded our cameras, our lights, and we just keep pouring the funds that we receive back into getting a better and better production. So 2 ways you can do it. One is to do a YouTube super chat, or I think sometimes it's thanks. Usually right below the actual video on whatever device you're watching on. Under the chat, they keep changing what it's called. I just cannot keep up. Maybe Dave can do a link for you. Anyway, that's an easy way to do a single one-time contribution, and that's great. We appreciate that. Another way to do it, though, would be to join my subscription membership. This is a monthly membership where I issue 2 new lessons every single month for always. And so you get more value for that, frankly. It's $12.97 a month, and there's no limit to how long you have to stay. And what happens is when you're a current paying subscriber, you have access to all the lessons that have ever been published. And there's getting close to be 100 in there now. It's been growing for a couple of years and continues to grow. And then if you let your subscription lapse, then the whole thing closes. And so you don't get to download and things like that, although there are practice sheets and things you can have. So does that make sense? When you're an existing member, you have access to everything for always, not just from the day you join, right? So extends backwards in that way. So that's a great way for you to get some super value. And that membership includes a close-up kind of behind-the-scenes look at custom quilt projects like this and lots of others. I love doing case studies that are an actual client quilt, and here's the challenges and here's how I solve them. It's also freehand edge-to-edge designs are in there that are separate from courses that I teach about that. Guest teachers come into that. One that we issued this month that I just think is charming, a lady from England by the name of Sarah Beckvar. Maybe you've seen her on social media. She's really growing. But she does free motion embroidery, chiefly on greeting cards. She does do it on other linens and things too for the home, but she's gotten sort of well known for her beautiful greeting cards. So she did a little lesson on how to free motion embroider a greeting card, because it's exactly the same motions as free motion quilting. It is at a domestic machine. So she talks about the tools and how she does it, and it's just really fun, and you can make your own very, very personal cards with that. So that was something that was included in the September lessons this month. So Dave will put a link up for that, and there's always one in the description. You can always find that membership, and like I said, no minimum length of time to join. Okay, have we got some comments and or questions? I'll move Stella and her glaring gold thread out of the way a little. Debbie, I got some Kai blunt tip scissors at a quilt show last week. I told the vendor that you mentioned their scissors and he should give me a 10% discount on your behalf, and he did, so thanks. Kai is fabulous that way. It's often the same gentleman. I think his name is Scott. I'm not even sure what his first name is, but I recognize him from shows, and they're so wonderful. And these are the scissors Debbie's speaking of. They're my little trimmers at my quilting machine, and can you see they have a little curved tip? Love them, and it's a blunt tip. They also do a curved tip that's sharp. But for long armors, that blunt tip is much safer and great, and they just live in the handlebar of my machine, and I love those little snips. Susan Barry, you have such great control of your machine. I'm practicing machine control. That is a thing that comes with time, Susan. I'm pretty sure you've taken my master class, but that's one of my foundational lessons in it, is almost practicing your handwriting with your machine and getting rhythmic and smooth and even, all those things. I think machine control has been a focus for me in my quilting journey, and sort of thinking through how can I acquire that. It doesn't have to be just doing 500 quilts. There's ways you can speed it up. Yeah, and it's so fun. It's so rewarding. Leslie, thanks for providing the link and discount. Just placed an order. Wonderful. Excited to receive the product. So do you mean Purple Hobbies from Heather? She'll be so thrilled to see you. That's wonderful. Good, good. Heather is super. Heather was a student too at one time, and so now we've kind of struck up a friendship over her products. And like I said, I just love that someone who is a quilter is designing the tools, because she knows what are the things that we need, and she needs what are the shortcomings maybe of some of the products that exist, and so she just sets out to create the perfect ones. All right, lovely. I think we should do some wings just because I want to see how it's going to work out. Shall we do that? Okay, so these little wings, they're out of a shiny semi-sheer lame fabric. It's white-ish with little silver sparkles. And all the blue on it is my drawing that came from the pattern. These are all the veins, I guess, of the wings that she suggested for detail. And in case you weren't here earlier, the instructions in the pattern were to take the quilt top only to the sewing machine and zigzag on all those blue areas, and then to quilt the thing and quilt some level of detail in that wing. I decided instead to bring it to my long arm and put silver thread on, and I'm just going to go over those areas 3 or 4 times, or however many I think looks good. I'm not going to try and zigzag. And the quilting definition will be the same as those veins then. So that's my idea. Let's see how it turns out. I'm going to still leave my gold thread in the bobbin. I think that they're similar enough. That will be fine. I don't have to change that out. And I've brought a couple of choices for my top thread. We're going to try them out, and I also brought a little tiny sample of fabric, which I'm going to stick on a corner here. Lovely that I have a little extra space to give them a try. So I have a spool that I've never used. It is Superior Metallics, so by Superior Thread. Obviously, use Top Stitch 9014 needle. Aha, it's like I thought that through, and I didn't. And it is also 40 weight. And it says reduce upper tension to 1. So we'll give that a try. We'll reduce that upper tension. We're going to load this thread on. This is definitely metallic. My other choice that I have handy is a very similar color, not metallic, but just silvery, and this is my isocord thread. So this is my fallback because I'm positive this one will work. I just like the idea of the shiny. So let's give it a whirl and see what happens. So I'm going to try it first on my little sample. I know that that's not quite comparable to this because it's not the lame and it doesn't have the fusible behind it, but we'll start there and hopefully it will give us a heads up if there's any glaring things we need to change. I need a cap for that. Gosh, I haven't even used a thread net lately. Hang on, you guys, I'm going out of camera, hunting a little bit for my thread net. I think that would do it. And let's see if I have a cap. I don't think I do. My sewing machine one might fit. Let's try it. Okay, I'm coming back. So I've got a little thread net. I'm going to put that around my spool. I think that might help control the metallic. It's a little more springy, you know, than regular thread is. If we could get it on. There we go. Oh, I'm struggling. There we go. It's on there. And then let's see if my cap for my sewing machine will fit on top. It does, just so that the spool can't lift up. Beyond that, I'm just going to thread it like I ordinarily would. It's really jerking. Let me see if I can load it better onto the... Yeah, I went through the thread net. I want to do that. Get inside it properly. I'm pulling on the thread and it's really jerking. I can't see why, but that will not be a good thing. Still is a little. It's better. We're going to give it a whirl. We won't know until we try. It'll soon let us know if we're getting uneven, tension or wobbles in our stitching. I'm not very experienced using metallic threads. I hardly ever have done it. But we do have the recommended needle. Superior, by the way, is so good with their threads, about recommending appropriate needles to use with it. I love that about them. I feel like you can almost go to Superior's website and get a needle and thread education. They give so much information about it. Okay, so there's our thread on. Here's my little scrappy scrap. I will come over to this side so you can see it better. It's just a little leftover scrap of fabric. We're just going to put on there and stitch on it a bit and see what result we get. Let's turn that top tension way down. We've got stitch regulation on, top tension way down. It said 1 on the spool. Maybe so for metallic. I know it is very different. And yet I cannot pull it through. I cannot pull that through the needle. That's not going to work. Let's rethread and see if we've got an issue there. Scissors. We do. I can see it. That springy quality of it, it wrapped around something on the left here. So I saw that problem before we dived in. So let's rethread. I'm hanging on to it with my left hand until I get things into the tension disc so it stays put. Are there good ideas coming through, Dave? Yeah, so far it's not feeling good. Like I'm through the tension discs, but it is so tight, it's pulling my lever down. So that's not going to work. So unless I can figure that out better, like it's just stretching but not releasing. Okay, what are some of the ideas in case they have to do with that? Let's see them. Metallic thread, I had to do it on the add-on horizontal spool holder because it always broke on the vertical holder. Okay, good point. And I don't think I have one. Fold the thread net in half. That's not a bad idea. We can try that and fold it down. I don't think that's the issue, but hey. It is feeding through, but it's jerky. Oh, thanks, Doreen, for the super chat. I appreciate it. I know I'm wasting a couple yards of thread, but there's no way this is going to work. It pulls and then it releases with a jerk. I'm going to turn my spool upside down in case it's just catching the, you know how the edge of the spool sometimes has a snip on it for holding your thread end? Let's see if that's an issue. Oh, that won't work. Woo! Okay, Susan, get it together. Thread net is in half. Helps to put the spool in from the top. Yes, it does. I lost my little cap. I may not need that little cap. I just felt like the spool might pull upwards. I could be wrong about that. Okay, let's feel this now. It is less jerky, but not much. I don't know if you guys can hear that on camera. Every so often, it literally pulls right here, and then snap, it releases, and there's no way that will work. Okay, what to do? Janice has a suggestion. Janice is suggesting no net. Let's try it. I don't think it matters vastly which side of my spool is up. I mean, I can change that. So Janice, there is less of a pull, but it is still there. I can literally hear it twanging. It pulls and then twangs, and that is the weirdest thing.
Okay, and look at this one.
And yet when I pull the thread from the spool, it's smooth. Nadia, feed it through the little sponge on your left side with a drop of silicone oil. Okay, let me see. I've got that silicone oil here somewhere. You guys are fabulous, by the way. Here's my little silicone oil that came with my machine. So do you put the little drop of oil on the silicone pad, is my understanding. So that's what I'm going to do. Done a nice little drop on there. Let's see if that helps. Just put that to the side for the moment. So now I'm going to go back to my threading. I'm going to go through one holder, over the silicone pad, through the next holder. So it's being drawn across there. Come on, Stella, you can do it.
saying...
That is not any better. If anything, it's stiffer because now it's through another hook. Okay, Barbara's got a comment. Being a spool, you will need it pulling off the side. They're not meant to be pulled at the top. It will take a horizontal spool pin. You know, Barbara, I think you're right on that. It should not be pulling, in other words, this way. It should be pulling this way. And I don't have the horizontal spool pin. So, you know what, guys? We're going to call that an experiment that needs further analysis, and we're going to let it go for today because I want to get some wings quilted. Thank you all for your tips. I will take those into consideration. I will get me a horizontal holder for one thing. And we will just tuck these things to the side. Grab some coffee for fortitude. Okay. That makes really good sense, Barbara. Mr. Producer's here looking. What are you suggesting? That's fixed. No, we're not going to start making one in the middle of the show. Mr. Producer's offering to make me a horizontal spool holder, and I have no doubt he can. But probably not right now in the middle. The truth is, I don't even know how much different it would look. And also, I don't know how the metallic would like having 2 or 3 or 4 times being stitched over top of, where I'm pretty sure my polyester will be able to take that. Okay, now I got to remember to put my tension back up to normal. Okay, we're just going to run a little test here on my little Weiss watch. That's what Weiss watches are for. And by the way, when I do a little swatch like this, my usual methods are to do loops and to do points. Those will show up tension issues. So loops like that and points like this. Because you'll see right away if loops are pulling tight or if points are getting a little pulled thread at the corners. And actually it looks just fine. I'm going to run my nail along it underneath and see what it feels like. Yeah, no railroading. Feels lovely under there. I don't even have my side clamps on today, but I don't think they're essential for a quilt this small. I don't know. I might get proven wrong. Okay, let's get rid of all this silver thread. Oh my goodness sakes, it's everywhere. And let's start on a wing. So I think what I'll do is the outside edge first, and then we'll just start laying in those details. 1 or 2 of these wings, I inadvertently did a blast of steam on, not really thinking, and I think it was this one. So I can't really see the blue lines all that well. But I can make an educated guess. You can hear the needle pounding through because there are several layers here. And again, I'm not going to sweat too much about following the line exactly because I'm going to go over it a couple more times. I'm just choosing to do the outside first in one layer so that I can get it affixed in case that fusible lets go at any point. I'll look and see where I'm going. I can't see that one. I think 3 is going to be a minimum number of times to go over this. It might end up being more than that. Which is not a bad thing because it makes it very easy to travel. Just stitch over it again. After I get a couple of these done and think that I've got enough space, I will go ahead and spritz it so the blue disappears, so we can kind of get a better idea of what it actually looks like without a whole bunch of blue ink on it. But I tell you what, that's an awful lot faster than zigzagging all these areas at the sewing machine. Can you just imagine? So a tiny skip stitch there, and that's the first one I've seen. It's been doing really well so far. This is my third time around the perimeter. That was kind of my worry with the metallic thread, is that overstitching would cause it to bung up, right? It's more prone to splitting and stripping the thread than poly is. Okay, there it is. Can you guys even see that on the camera? I don't know, because of all the blue. That's kind of cool. And of course, it means I do not have to applique that black wing under there, which actually Joanne, the author of the pattern, mentioned that there's no need to applique this one wing. Woohoo, time saver right there. Okay, starting on the next one. So, funny story. Do you want to put the big camera on for a sec, Dave? I don't know if this will help some of you, but it might. When I'm working on control like this, which is not a consistent movement like a circle or a swoop, you know, a loop, right? I'm just trying to follow a line. I actually kind of brace myself. I've got 1 foot forward and 1 foot back so that I can use my body a little bit as a stabilizer. So try that and see if it helps you, as opposed to just getting all hunched in here and trying to do all the control with your hands. I find that helps. Okay, we can go back to close up if you want to. I didn't know if you would be able to see me, but that is what I'm doing, is just bracing myself. The thread keeps hopping out of the one guide. Silly thing. It's really hard to see where these blue lines are going here. Murray, my sister-in-law, may find that these bees are a little bit like snowflakes. Everyone is a little bit different. Yeah, no two are going to be alike, I don't think. Mostly because I cannot see where the blue lines went in some cases. If I got a dot of water on them anywhere or steam, they're gone. Just gone. I do like the fact that this is the quilting too, as opposed to doing all this detail on the flat quilt top and then only quilting over 1 or 2 of the lines. And again, that's kind of why I opted for that double batting, is because I think it's going to make all these details really stand out in relief against the more tightly quilted areas like the bubbles. That's my hope anyways. You don't always know exactly what the result is going to be kind of three-dimensionally quilted. You can draw out things on paper and have ideas all you want. They don't always translate, but that's my goal with that particular decision. Okay, round the outside edge a few more times, and we'll call this pair of wings a wrap. And I am making sure that at least one of my lines is pretty close to 1/8 of an inch in. Like, I don't think there's any chance that this is going to come frayed and undone, but I want to make sure enough of it is caught that I don't get a funky frayed edge that comes out from under the stitching. And again, this is intended for a wall hanging, so I don't think it's likely to ever get washed, you know, maybe sponged a little bit over the years, so. All right, I'm going to set up a little bit of a guard here, and we're going to spritz those wings and get rid of the blue and see what it looks like. Yes, we are. Inquiring minds want to know. Of course, it looks dark now because it's wet, but it's pretty cool, you guys. They look like wings. They look like wings. I'm happy with that. I'm not sure how much that shows. Do we want to pan over it?
Yes, we do.
We want to pan over it. Okay, I'll do a nice slow pan. It's quite see-through because it's wet. But yeah, you get the loft of it there. I think that'll be great. The wonky stitching, I'm okay with that. And my second one turned out better than my first one, so such is life. Okay, let's go on to the next set. After this set, then I'll maybe stop and do some of the details in the hexies. You know, if I weren't filming this, I might go ahead and do all the wings and do all that anchoring. I'm not sure. Or do the background and wings all the way down and then come back and do the hexies in one fell swoop. But I want to try and give you a bit of most of the things. So not sure if hexies or bees will be next. But let's do one more set of wings. Get this pair done. Again, I'm really bracing my feet so that, I don't know, my body somehow just holds me a little bit rather than just try to do this control with my arms. The camera's wobbling a bit, I know it is, and you can hear the machine kind of popping because it is going through multiple thicknesses of not only fabric but also of the fusible. But so far, I mean, my tension is turning out fine. The stitches are forming beautifully. And probably before I give this quilt to Murray, I'll take the risk of actually flushing it through water to get rid of that fusible stabilizer. And that's when I will block it. In other words, I will set it out flat on the floor and I will probably pin it to the exact shape I want, make it nice and flat, leave it to dry. It works a bit like if you've ever knitted or crocheted or known someone who does, those types of things, those types of textiles are always blocked to give them shape. They're very floppy and shapeless until that is done. And that can be really helpful for a quilt too. And doing that type of blocking, I do it even on my couch quilts. I do that type of blocking the first time when I make it. And I don't ever have to do it again, but it helps it just to retain a good shape. But I think it will really come into play here. It will get rid of my wash away stabilizer, and it will just make everything take on the shape it should. And if there's any distortion from all of this quilting, I can kind of ease that out and teach it what shape it should hang in, make it nice and flat. What's the consensus, guys? Should I stitch the outline of the bees in black or in gold? I'm definitely leaning toward black because of the volume of black legs and how slim they are, and I think gold would be distracting. Or should I change threads? Surely not. Surely not. Well, I'm pleased with that. Another set of wings. Good deal. All right. Are there any comments yet on that thread choice, Dave, or shall I just bite the bullet? I'm going to get me another sip of cafe. Okay. Black thread it is. Well, Mr. Producer says, give me a minute to make a poll. Give me a minute. I did ask earlier, in fairness. Okay. I'm going to step out of camera for a second. I'm running for an alcohol swab. I'm going to give my needle a clean. I think that I see a bit of residue on it from the fusible, I'm sure. Which I'm sure must vary like from brand to brand and, you know, product to product. Because I stitch t-shirt quilts and things like that on the regular, which have some amount of fusible, like a fusible interfacing, for example. But it's not as gluey as this, but I can actually see a little clump of glue on my needle. So, makes sense then. I'm just whipping out a little tiny alcohol swab and clean my needle a little bit before I thread it again. Beautiful. Okay. I've got black on. We'll stop and have a chat for a minute, and if there's overwhelming difference, I might rethink it. But I'm pretty sure black, because we've got all those little black legs, right? The question then is, should I be changing the bobbin thread to black too? Really, nobody's going to see the back of the quilt. So I don't really care if there's black scribbles on the back. I think I may do that because I feel like if golden threads, well, I'm thinking out loud. I'm thinking out loud. You get to see the whole process at work. First thought is, but if golden threads pop through to the top on the black, I'm not going to like the look of that. But on the heels of that, I'm remembering I've got 2 layers of batting. There's so much thickness there. Chances are that gold thread is not going to show through on the front. So I'm going to start with gold on the bottom, black on the top, and see how it goes. Now on my little bees, you can see this one here. The way that this was cut is this gold piece here is all one, and the black is on top of it. Even at the bottom tail edge, it overlaps. So therefore, if I stitch those black edges, it's anchoring all the gold. So really, this is all the gold and his little bit of his head. That's all the gold that I'll ever be stitching on. So black it is. Okay, any other things we want to discuss, Mr. Producer, before we go on? I'm liking the look of this one as the blue is gone and it's starting to dry. It's getting a little more delicate looking as opposed to these garish, bluish wings that they initially looked like, right? Okay, there are questions or thoughts? Let me grab my coffee and we'll talk about them. And then also, how are we doing for time and how long do we want to go? Like, I mean, I'm gonna keep quilting for a while, and so we might as well stay on and yeah. Other camera view, hun? Nadia, for another quilt, it could be, and I'll get out of the way of it, could be funny couching the veins with a silver yarn with the couching foot so you get thicker veins in. That's a super idea, Nadia. That would be a really great way to emphasize that. Yep. Leslie, I wonder how it would look instead of multiple stitching using a heavier top thread like 12 weight or thin yarn. Kind of the same principle, right, as that idea of couching. Not a bad idea also. It so happens that I don't have either one in silver. Noreen, coming late, what's the yellow on the quilt? Do you mean between the hexies? In which case it's my background fabric? Be more specific on that and I'll try and answer it, Noreen. Jennifer, how would you handle a quilt that has both wool and cotton applique pieces? Generally, like wool applique is usually stitched down around its perimeter. So in that sense, I usually handle them the same in that my quilting ends up just being around them, stitching in the ditch around them, maybe with a little bit of detail stitched over top of them. But I am actually appliquing this down at the long arm, so I have to stitch over that edge. I would not typically do that on wool or cotton applique, like that was needle turned or anything like that. Corey, I've never blocked a quilt before. Can you share your process? Yes, I'll tell you this for starters. If you go to my Instagram account, the little highlights that are under my profile, one of those little round circles, I think, is blocking. I can't remember if I named it in its own place, but there is one there in which I show it. But simply put, I put the quilt on, I have a carpeted floor which is on top of concrete, so I put it right on there. However, if you live in a humid climate, maybe you don't want to do that. I know other quilters who use like a construction styrofoam sheets. Absolutely works too. Something you can insert a pin into, push a pin into. So spread the quilt out, moisten it. I spritz it. In this case, I will probably actually be flushing my quilt through water and gently hand wringing it out, so it's going to be wet. But in more cases, I just spritz it generously with water. I'm thinking like a half a cup or maybe even a whole cup of water spritzed on a lap-sized quilt, so it's moist. And then I sit and spread it out with my hands. Now, I don't go crazy about like getting a 90-degree angle with a laser level or something like that. I just do it by eye. Is the thing square? Are the corners nice and 90 degree and they're not, pinched looking, for example? And I spread that all out and even it with my hands. And then I take my corsage pins like I use at the long arm and I put pins like sort of against the binding and into the flooring, into the carpeting. And then I leave it to dry. So it takes on that shape. So if, for example, if you've bound a quilt, you know how sometimes if you lay it out flat, you will get, almost always, you will get a little bit of rippliness, either excess or pulling at the edge. It's just the nature of fabric. And you can smooth that right out and it will lay so beautifully flat just by moistening and spreading. And if it's really simple and doesn't need much correction, I don't even bother with the pins. I just moisten it, spread it, leave it to dry. Long explanation. Anyway, I do have a little tiny video with an example of that in my Instagram highlights. Okay. Keep quilting is what we're saying. Let's get her done. Okay, we're gonna start on a little bee. Yeah, we're just gonna start at one edge and work our way around and probably do some backtracking here and there. Roll the shoulders, loosen up. I'm just checking. I do still have my 12 stitches per inch. I think a smaller stitch length is good here, especially for these little leg bits, right? So helpful. A longer stitch length would be a little more difficult. I am getting a... I did! Did I hit a button when I was saying that? I'm thinking that needle is going so fast. It is at stitches per inch 24. I do not want that. 12. Maybe 13. Lucky number 13. How's that? Much better. I thought it was just me. So like here, for example, the yellow is actually underneath this. So with this stitching, I'm catching that gold and I don't need to do another layer of stitching over it. If that makes sense. Gold thread is not showing through at all, so that's being worn out. I don't have to worry about that. Now, the wing holds all this down, so I'm going to go ahead and break thread right here. That was not too bad. That was not too bad at all. I didn't know how long that might take, quite frankly. I'm just going to skip over, not even cut the thread. I still secured it. These little geezers, I'm just going to stitch right off the tips of them. They're so tiny. So tiny. Again here, the edge of this black is overlapping on the yellow. I'm going to stitch it again because I was too close to the edge. Anchor it. And just skip over and I can cut these little threads later. As long as they don't get in the way of when I'm quilting in the hexies, they'll be fine. One bee done. I mean, that's not too bad. Maybe I should clip those threads as I go. What if I forget them afterwards and somebody catches their finger in them because they're pretty small. Okay, that's a bee. So I feel like, oh, I gotta do this little top part here. I feel like that's enough quilting for the bee. He's going to be quite three-dimensional. This one area of his body is, this area right here is perhaps 2 inches from top to bottom and sort of a triangle shape that's a good 3 or more at the bottom. What do you guys think? Is that enough quilting for that, or should I do something more? If I'm going to do more, I feel like I would want gold thread for that, very deep gold thread that matched it. So for the moment, I'm going to leave it. Bee number 2. Don't have to start at the top, actually. Oh, I was going to mention to you guys too, lots of you that have been watching for a long time, let me get myself on camera, will remember Joan Parker. She was a student of mine. She took the time to organize some of you who made me a lovely, lovely friendship quilt, and she's been in and out of these sessions for some years. Anyway, Joan has recently started a YouTube channel. Dave's going to put a link, I know he is, in the chat for you. Go over there and give Joan some love. She loves making scrappy quilts, so that's what her episodes are about so far. Give Joan a follow. Very hard to see under this giant hopper foot. So another option would be, and I think I will do it, to change this big old ruler foot out for something finer so that I can see a little better. And I think I will do that on the next bee. It only takes a second to change, because on these delicate little feet it's very hard to judge where to go. Whoop, I need to go across here. Like right here, I just can't tell what's coming because it's so tiny. My little tiny snips that I talked about earlier by Kai. You can see how little they are. Little curved tip, little blunt end. Perfect. I've had other snips at my long arm before, you know, curved ends, what have you, and they've been fine. Generally, they've been probably less expensive, but these have retained their sharpness, and I've had them for some years, where others I have replaced every 6 months sometimes because they just lose their snipping power. So I do love these little guys. They've traveled with me all over the US. They're good little snips. And by the way, I don't have a formal affiliation with Kai by any means. They know me from the time that I was working for Bernina, and those two companies are good friends. So, but anyway, I don't get anything from a sale of the scissors. I just like to recommend a really great product to you because they are super. The Kai folks are very knowledgeable. Okay, let's make sure I'm not forgetting any tidbits. We would not want our little bees to lose any body parts. They're hanging on the wall. I think for this one, I'm just going to slip right across to that little leg. Just keep going. Overall, I'm pleased with this as a choice of method compared to trying to do this sort of stuff like that feeler with a blanket stitch at my domestic sewing machine. I just see headache upon headache. Where this I feel like is a ton faster and equally secure and probably less visible stitching. I think it would be terribly hard to stitch around those tiny feelers and ends of feet without, you know, getting black thread out on the gold parts of the quilt, and a lot of it. Okay, 2 bees are appliqued. Woohoo! Okay, any comments or discussion points? It may be that there's not. Okay, what I'm going to do then... Oh, someone's asking the wing fabric again. It is just a lame. I think I bought it actually at Walmart. So I just went looking for something that was semi-translucent and a bit shiny, sparkly. So Joanne gives some recommendations in the pattern, which I've linked to in the description. I couldn't find exactly what she was talking about, so this looked wing-like to me. And I just used, I think it was Heat and Bond 2 was my wash away fusible stabilizer. What I'm going to do, I think, you guys, because everything now is anchored, right? Between B and this stuff that I've done between the hexies, I'm going to go ahead and leave those hexies till last. They're going to get some ruler work, but I think I'm going to go ahead and do all the Bs. I think the hexies are going to be fairly simple, so there's not anything earth-shattering for you to see. I believe I'm just going to do a 1/2 inch echo, 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 till I get into the B. That's my current plan. They're a bit busy of a fabric, so quilting is not going to show, and the bubbles are quite detailed, so I don't want to do something terribly detailed. So that's what I'm leaning toward right now. Pretty simple. So I'm going to go ahead and advance the quilt. Is the question, how do I bury them, or why would I? I'm sorry, I still didn't hear the beginning. When do I? Okay, got it. So the question is, when do you bury threads versus cutting? Much personal preference comes into play here. I personally only tie and bury threads if it's a high-level show quilt or someone has specifically asked for it. On a quilt like this, where really anybody viewing it who's not a detailed quilter is not going to know the difference, and maybe not even then, I wouldn't take the time to do it. Like, how many thread breaks am I doing, and how long would that take to tie and bury for what level of better quality? So to me, it's not worth it. I hardly ever tie and bury threads. In fact, I've gone so far as some quilts that I've done for customers who do love that, I'm like, I'll do all the ends and you get to tie and bury, because to pay me my hourly rate to tie and bury your threads is gonna add up. And if you want that all done, it's gonna be part of the quilting quote, right? So that's my personal opinion. I can do a pretty neat little lock stitch and call it good. So I've tried to advance far enough so that I can do both sides of these wings, but I don't know if I can because of my ruler plate. I cannot. So then can I do the whole bee? Yes, I can. So I'm just measuring how far down I can quilt, right? I've got a ruler plate on, so I've lost a bit of my throat depth. So I cannot do the second wing unless some of them are way up there at arm's length, and I don't like quilting that way. So I'm gonna move it just so I can do the whole bee plus one wing, and then I'll advance in order to do the next wing. It is much easier for me to quilt closer to me. I love having the availability of my throat space, but I seldom use all of it because it's hard to quilt with control way out there at arm's length. So we're going to do it like this. And now we need to baste those edges again. And I've got black thread on, and I'm going to go ahead and baste them with black, even though the earlier part was basted in gold. Doesn't matter. That's all going to fall inside the binding. I'm just kind of judging the symmetry, that's the word I want. You know, is everything laying even? And I'm going to drop just a few pins in those edges to make sure that I don't inadvertently stretch those bias edges while I'm basting. So we'll just drop a few pins in there. Keep everything in place. Perfect. And as I showed earlier when I did this, it doesn't matter if it's not perfectly straight or even. Like, you certainly could use a curved ruler to make this even, but it doesn't matter because it's all going inside that bound edge. I just have to make sure I keep my stitches, you know, within that 1/4 inch or so space at the edge. It doesn't matter one whit what they look like. I should tell a little bit more of the story. I keep alluding to it and not getting on with it. So this is for Mr. Producer's sister. Her name is Murray, and it's M-E-R-I. Bet you've never heard of that one before. Anyway, she is a beekeeper. Over the years, she's kept bees quite a few years and produced a lot of honey, and so it is quite fun as a family. We're forever showering her with bee stuff. Anyway, a few years ago, I'm kind of half ashamed to say how many because it's more than 5 for sure. She was visiting us, and we were in a quilt shop. And it so happens that my local quilt shop is called the Quilting Bee. And so they've got a sample of this quilt hanging on the wall because it's just so appropriate for their shop. And Murray saw it, and I saw it, and I thought, that's a cute quilt. And she thought, oh, bees. So the deal was, she bought the pattern, I made the quilt. Someone got the better end of that deal. Anyway, here I am, umpteen years later. But I'm quite determined now because in just a few weeks' time, we are going to visit family in northern Canada, which is where we're from, and a couple of our kids and parents and siblings still live there, including Murray. And so I thought to myself, okay, now's the time. I am going to get this quilt done and take it with me. We're driving also, so I don't have to entrust it to the mail. I can personally take it. So that's what I'm doing. Someone's reminding me to change the foot. See what I'm saying? You guys are the best team ever. And I just knocked my ruler out of my little holder. Change the foot. Yes, let us do that. It will be so much easier on the bees. Now we do have to decide what we're doing next, though, is the thing. I think what I'll do, let's have our big camera for half a jiffy, please, our broad view. I think what I'll do, looking at all of these bees, right, and thinking again about my edges are basted, but I kind of want to divide and conquer as opposed to starting at one side and working toward the other one. So I think what I'll do is applique this center bee very next, and then we'll kind of work our way out from that. So yes, changing the foot on the Bernina is as simple as, do you want to do close up? And I can show you. It's as simple as popping a little lever. Right there, off it comes. On goes the next one. And FYI, Bernina uses sewing machine needles, which I mentioned earlier, just the same needles I use at my sewing machine, exactly flat back needles. And also, the feet are interchangeable if the feet are spring-loaded. So either of these feet, which are both spring-loaded, I can also attach to my Bernina sewing machine and use them there to do quilting too, which is kind of cool. All right, let us stitch this little bee in place. Keep feeling like we must be nearing the end of the bobbin, but it's perhaps hard to gauge that when I'm not doing steady stitching, you know? Oh, basting stitch is still on. We don't want that. Yes, this is certainly better for visibility. And if you were doing something like this and you don't feel comfortable just winging it along the edges of those bees, you'd have to have your ruler foot on, mind you. But you could bump your ruler up against the foot and just shift it as you go and just use it as a bit of a stabilizer to have your foot against. But again, you would have to have the ruler foot on if you wanted to do that. Got to make choices. I mentioned earlier, but I'll say it one more time. The gold body portion of this bee is one large section, so that's why I'm not worried about top stitching or applique stitching over the gold portions here in the middle of him, because the black is literally just laying on top. And in some cases, like the head and the tail, the black overlaps the edge. So when I stitch down the edge of the black, I am in fact catching the yellow and holding it as well. So in case you wonder why I'm not stitching securely on both sides, you know, the yellow side and the black side, that's why. That little foot was coming unstuck. I had to hold him in place. Well, in case you are just joining lately, let me give you a wee rundown again of what we're working on. This is a wall hanging. It's called the Quilting Bee. Link to the pattern is in the description in case you want to make one too. And as I was making it, I got a little overwhelmed with the amount of work that there was in cutting out these applique pieces, fusing them, and then the instructions were to also machine applique, all the details on these little legs and feelers, etc., to do it in a blanket stitch or seed stitch, whatever you want to call it. And so I decided I'm going to take shortcuts, and I am instead appliquing them while I'm quilting at the long arm. So a little unorthodox perhaps, but it's actually working really well. And likewise the wings. The instructions were to, on all these blue lines, to zigzag over all of those to create that vein detail. And I've opted to just quilt over it in several rows. And you guys have given me some good suggestions, and those of you who want to try something similar might want to take them, like what about using a 12-weight thread instead of stitching over them several times, or a couching, you know, cord or yarn to get more defined veins. All great ideas for sure. I am stitching at a Bernina Q24 machine, and I have a top stitch needle loaded. I'm using 40-weight Isacord 100% polyester thread. Glossy, strong. Notice the queen has the special feelers. And this is a live and unscripted show, meaning we're streaming this absolutely live. We edit off some of our sound checks, and today was a particular funny sound check with me still leaving my mic on during it, and Correcting Dave, bless his heart. Anyway, we just edit that off at the beginning, but the rest of the show is absolutely live and in real time. So you get to see me working on projects, talking through my decisions, etc. Did you see that? His foot broke. Let's see if we can stitch it back in place. Of course we can. There it is. There you have it. So there's that little leg in place. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, you know, being YouTube, it's always free to watch. I try to bring you valuable content, interesting quilts. I'm not really a gatekeeper, so I talk about my process and my decisions and choices all the way through. However, if you would like to support the channel, it is always, always appreciated. It enables us to keep getting better and better with our productions. And the easiest way to do that as a one-time thing is to do a super chat right here on YouTube. And secondarily, if you want to do a longer term support and also get some value for your money directly, I do have a subscription monthly membership. It is called Advance. Not because it is for advanced quilters, but because it's all about advancing your skills. And in that membership, you receive 2 new pieces of content or lessons every single month. Sometimes case studies about interesting custom quilting like this or other challenges that I have in client quilts. Sometimes it's freehand designs that are edge to edge. Sometimes it's freehand designs that are for custom work. Sometimes it's guest presenters. All kinds of interesting things. So as a current subscriber, you receive access to all of the content. You have access to all of it as long as you remain current. And there is no minimum time, but when you do not keep up the subscription, then all the content disappears. So right now, because it's growing, right, over time, right now we must be approaching 100 lessons in there. I should count again, so I know. There's quite a bit of information in there, and I try to label it, and I also upload it in chronological order so that you can, for example, find the things from 2025 and the things from 2024, and try to keep it organized in that way so that you can find things when you want them. One more bee before we switch to our other foot again. If you missed the earlier part of this episode, it includes a lot of different topics. Clearly, you know, the applique and the intricacies and thread choices, but also at the beginning I actually loaded this project. So we talked a little bit about the process of loading a quilt and my quick method of not needing to center it. So you don't need to find the center of the backing or the top of the quilt, etc., and how I do that. And also we talked about the fact that I'm using a double layer of batting. And in addition to that, I spliced the batting, which it's not always a thing I do on, you know, kind of a high-end quilt. However, on this one, I was aided by the fact that there is 2 layers of batting, right? So it's kind of extra padding and extra sort of camouflage. But anyway, I do have a little nifty method for doing that with a scalloped cut so that it doesn't show. And it's a method I use quite a lot to use up my pieces of batting. So hopefully that will help someone. I'm going to go around the top edge of this leg again because I saw that I didn't quite catch it at one point, and I'm worried that that would come untethered. So now I have fixed that. And I see that with this guy, I actually got his one wing placed a little differently. I'm going to see if I can fix that. Can you guys see that? This leg is almost covered. There we are. And this one is not fully covered, and it should be. So I'm going to try and actually shift it. Don't know if that is doable. Yeah, it is. See, this peels right off. I'm just going to shift it a little. we go. And that's probably not as firmly stuck as it was before, but it'll be fine until I stitch it. I'm not going to roll the quilt anymore until that is stitched down. So I think it'll be okay. Are any of you working on projects at home today? I've not asked that before during today's episode, because I know often you are. Working on something at home while I'm working on this. I'd love to hear about it. Now, I'm recollecting. I think I need to. I did it on the first 2 bees. I didn't do it on these 3. This little area right here. That is yellow on top of black. So I've got to stitch that down. One way or another, I've got to stitch it down, and it turns out I have to stitch it on the yellow side because it's actually on top of the black. I can't leave an unaffixed edge there. Wow, that's not very neat. But it's staying. So as I'm doing that, I'm thinking to myself, one of the decisions I was leaving until I'm nearer done is whether or not to do more quilting in this area here. So I think I'm going to not do any more of those for now, because if I come back and quilt in this area, that'll take care of it. And that might be a better solution than that very awkward looking black stitching. So for the moment, we'll leave it, and I'm going to pin this wing just so it stays in the right place till I get that job done. Put the other foot back on. Mr. Producer's telling me we're at 2 hours and 20, so I think we should probably call it for today. Like, I am going to keep quilting, but it's also time for lunch for us. Don't know about you. You might be hungry too. So, ask if there are any questions that you have. I'm going to get myself set up for ruler work again, and I'm going to check my bobbin. And if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, I'd love to hear them before we sign off for the day. I feel like my bobbin's got to be getting low. I don't know for sure. Oh no, there's still lots on there. I'm looking forward to seeing this middle part, seeing the hexes sort of all anchored in place. I'm trying to decide if I should do the wings next or anchor those hexes and do the bubbles next. I don't know which is more critical to do first, or if it matters. It may not matter. I think I'm going to do the wings next, though. I do think that. And then I'll come back and fill in all those areas with the little bubbly bits. So we're going back to silver thread. All of these threads are isocords that I'm using today. This one is number 3971. It's a perennial favorite. It's a lovely, soft, slightly warm silvery color. And I have the same gold thread exactly in the bobbin as I have in my top thread. Okay, any thoughts or questions that we want to talk about? No questions, no comments? Well, you guys, I will do my best to, when I get this finished over the next day or two, post some pictures here on YouTube. I'm kind of getting used to that, and hopefully you are too. You can find them under posts. And it's just an easy way, actually, to share pictures with you of projects that I work on in these episodes and then don't finish and photograph until a couple of days later. So look for that in a couple days' time. And anything else we want to say, hon? Thanks for joining us. I'll just give one last description of Live and Unscripted. These are episodes where I'm usually working on a client quilt, although in this case it is one of mine. They're not lessons per se, because I don't have, the right fabric and the right thread to show up all the details. You're just seeing me work on things in real time. So we call it Quilting's first reality show. We do not edit out thread breaks or oopses or questions or decisions. They're all part of the process, and I welcome you to come into my studio basically and look over my shoulder as I'm quilting, and we appreciate you joining us. Sign up for the newsletter if you want to know when the next one is. I try and send out a notification a day or two in advance and a photo with kind of what I'm looking at doing and what some of the topics might be that I'm talking about. There's a newsletter sign up link in the description. Try to keep my newsletters, filled with stories and interesting things and information about upcoming episodes like this one. So thanks for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure quilting with you, and have fun with whatever projects you're working on. It's a great day for quilting. See you next time.